Welcome back to the show, everyone. It's Danny Haifong. As you can see, I'm joined by Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector and U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, journalist, and author, to go over the latest developments. So we begin with NATO issuing a warning saying that it is fully ready for Iran's potential retaliation against U.S. assets in Europe. NATO said it is fully ready to respond to any future Iranian attacks. Comes after a report from the Financial Times said that people close to the Iranian military and the Iranian government had said that there were many targets within Europe of U.S. assets that had been put on the table in case of a future restart of the war. This includes targets in Bulgaria, Cyprus, and undersea cables that would affect Europe greatly. Ibrahim Azizi, who is the chief parliamentarian for the national security of Iran, said that we're watching your move carefully, every move carefully. Any further mistake or miscalculation will carry consequences far greater than before. End your presence immediately. He said this to the United States. Now, Donald Trump is said to be weighing a nuclear attack on Iran. This comes from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had reported this, and The Telegraph has picked it up, saying that it is a likelihood that this has been discussed. However, despite this, Donald Trump has announced something completely different, saying that now we are in an economic D-Day against Iran, that there is a crushing economic operation that has been the biggest ever taken against any country underway. He did not go over details despite much of many texts there, but he did say that there would be consequences for any country that does this with Iran. So, Scott, help us understand these developments, in particular, this idea that Iran would target even European assets or U.S. assets in Europe, NATO assets in case of a future attack, as well as more talk about Trump considering the nuclear option. What do you make of all this?
Maybe it's a news cycle, and people have to fill the gap with something. Look, why would Iran strike European targets? I know there's people out there frothing at the mouth because Iran's won the war, and why not go in for the kill and all this. But Iran's not stupid. Why complicate the mix? It's not just about the military aspect. I don't think Iran's losing any sleep over the prospect of a NATO retaliatory strike. But the diplomatic and economic aspects cannot be ignored. And, Iran right now is in a position where the United States is increasingly isolated. It's winning on this front of getting the United States to leave the Gulf. One of the reasons why the United States would leave the Gulf is that, it feels abandoned by its NATO allies. And so let's just have Iran just give the United States a big gift. Hey, Iran, those European countries that really aren't having impact whatsoever on the war you're having with the United States and Israel, attack them. And now what you'll do is you make them politically close to the United States. See, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of military force to get Donald Trump excited. He just has to believe that Europe has come to, honored his call. And it changes the psychology. And since we're dealing with an emotionally unstable president, it would do it in a manner which is moving in the opposite direction Iran wants the United States to be moving. Iran wants the United States to be leaving the Middle East, not coming back to the Middle East with European assistance. The military help that Europe is providing is nothing. Why didn't, for all you big, bold, brave Iranian armchair generals, why didn't Iran attack Israel last time around? American tankers were coming out of Israel. But that's what's happening now in Bulgaria and Romania. So why not attack Israel? Well, didn't want to expand the conflict now, did they? It's the same thing. So I just think this is just stupidity in the extreme. There might be people in Iran that are talking about this, talking tough. But the notion that Iran is going to strike Europe is absurd. The United States has recognized there is no military solution to this problem. That's why Donald Trump's gone to the massive economic sanctions, or whatever the hell he's going to call this package, as if we've never heard these words before. I think we've put this pressure on Iran in the past, and it's never worked, and it isn't going to work this time. And this is reflective of the fact that Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. What we do know is he can't use military force to seize the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon has told him as such, and so he's gone to Plan B. It will fail. But the last thing Iran would be doing is attacking Europe. I mean, again, I don't make Iranian policy for the Iranians, but I couldn't think of a dumber move than that. It's stupid. It doesn't need to happen. All the pressure, if the conflict is resumed, all the pressure should be on punishing those nations in the region that helped the United States, not trying to get Europe to join the United States or somehow, embolden Donald Trump. So there's that. On nuclear, look, I've said this all along, and people, can listen to the way they want. If the United States is faced with, existential defeat, it will use nuclear weapons. It's just the way it is, guys. It's just the way it's going to be. It doesn't mean we're going to use them, because we're not faced with an existential defeat yet. We're faced with political embarrassment. There's a difference. And then the other thing, people are like, Iran's got to build their own nuclear weapon. Well, there's no greater way to guarantee an American nuclear strike against Iran than Iran building a nuclear weapon. I mean, right now, the talk of a nuclear weapon seems to be focused on Pickaxe Mountain, where there's a deep underground facility where Iran may or may not be doing things of a nuclear nature. I don't see the Iranians moving in that direction. Again, the son of Ayatollah Khamenei has assumed the mantle of the supreme leader. His father made it a point to make nuclear weapons, against Islam, haram, and they just beat the United States and Israel using conventional weapons. There's really no need for them to do this. They gain nothing from it. The United States was beaten militarily. Right now, the United States recognizes that it can't achieve its goals using conventional weapons, and the United States is pulling away from military confrontation, going to an economic siege. This will probably fail, which means the United States will have to eventually find some sort of diplomatic outcome. And so as long as Iran isn't building a nuclear bomb, I don't think there's anything to worry about. But, if the Iranians start getting bold and saying, we have a nuclear weapon, I would start worrying. We saw the United States say, when we diminished our long-range precision strike weapons globally, meaning that we don't have enough to fight China or Russia in the Pacific or European theaters, not to say least what continues conflict in Iran. What did the Trump administration do? They re-examined their nuclear posture and said, well, we're going to lower the threshold for using tactical nuclear weapons. We're going to use them a lot earlier in any potential conflict. Why? Because they got no other weapons to use. And so it is a dangerous situation. What you want to do, if you're the Iranians, is preclude the United States from feeling tempted to use nuclear weapons. And you do that by not expanding the conflict so that it becomes an existential one for the United States. Right now, all the United States has suffered is embarrassment. I mean, if the Middle East was this important to us, we'd be taking a different approach to the Middle East. But Trump, in his national security strategy document that was published in the fall of 2025, has, or fall of 2025, has said, we want to unplug from both Europe and the Middle East. We're not interested in these long-term, drawn-out wars. And so that's his natural inclination. So let him go. Don't do anything to keep him there. Let the United States withdraw. There will have to be, you had an Iranian senior negotiator, the Speaker of the Parliament, I believe, show up in Iraq yesterday or the day before and say that Iran understands that the United States needs a politically elegant exit strategy, that they have to save face. So the Iranians get it. They understand what this is about. It's about saving face. It's about giving Donald Trump a politically viable exit strategy. which is the smartest thing in the world to do. And if you do that, you take nuclear weapons off the table. There's no reason to use them, no justification, and no desire on the part of Trump to do this. So I think, but we have to recognize that they're on the table. They're being talked about. And this president, if given the right set of circumstances, would authorize nuclear weapons to be used. Of that, there is no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, very concerning, Scott. Well, I wanted to get your take, Scott, on this. The timing of all of this. We have, on the one hand, a report about Trump mulling nuclear attack, and then right after this, he comes out with economic D-Day, crushing economic sanctions and other weapons employed to essentially bring Iran down. It's not that this is nothing new to Iran. And then we have curious reports. It came at the same time as Barak Ravid announced this stealth operation that supposedly the United States has been conducting through the Strait of Hormuz, where he reports that this has been going on for the last several weeks, escorting tankers entering and exiting the strait each night through the southern channel, and saying that the United States had blown out in their attacks on Iran the radars that allowed their missiles and drones to effectively target both U.S. Warships and planes. But what doesn't really track is that the number of tankers through actual data appears to be much lower. So I'm curious on what your thoughts are on this kind of narrative spin, and if there's any truth to any of this. Is this just a way for the United States to try to get an off-ramp under Trump, where Trump really hasn't been able to find one?
I think it's an effort to create a narrative and spin the narrative in a way that's advantageous to the Trump administration. Again, I don't know the details. I'm not privy to the targeting undertaken by Central Command in the Strait of Hormuz area, or the battle damage assessment. I don't know what the intent of the targeting is. It would make sense if I were a targeteer. I would be going after the radar systems that help guide these missiles in. But I would also understand that the Iranians know that I'm going after them, and the concept of redundancy isn't one that should be unknown to the Iranians. And unless we were 100% successful in destroying these radars, and I think recent activity in the Strait of Hormuz area indicates that we weren't, because some ships have in fact been struck recently. This just appears to be one of these situations where this is what we wanted, and therefore somebody has briefed a journalist on what we wanted, and has hypothesized certain scenarios. What does it mean, escorted by a U.S. military? I don't think it means that U.S. ships are going through the strait. But we know that U.S. helicopters have been operating, and it may be that we have helicopters who are, escorting ships that have turned off their onboard GPS trackers and are seeking to secretly navigate their way through while we jam Iranian radars. Who knows what's going on? But let's say that's happening. As you pointed out, the number of ships that are getting through is very minor. And the other problem is, I don't think there's an insurance company in the world that would say, I'll insure that. I think the United States was offering some sort of insurance alternative that maybe some ships have taken them up on. But, this doesn't seem to be a program conducive to, supporting large amounts of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. This seems to be a program where a lot of resources are being put in to get a very small result, and then you spin that result, to try and achieve some sort of, politically beneficial dynamic in the media coverage. You get an article that says your ships are flowing through, but again, we don't know the veracity of this. Let's just assume that some, if not all, of the reporting is true. It's still so minuscule in terms of what's happening as to, negate its impact on the global economy, which is what this is all about, is enough shipping getting through with enough energy-related resources to restore, global energy balance? And I think the answer there is no.
Yeah. And Scott, the question now of economic isolation of Iran, it appears many seem to believe that now the strategy, or if we can call it that, or now the approach to Iran is to go full throttle economic warfare, sanctions, blockade, etc., and just focus on this. And I'm wondering, do you believe that Iran can be economically isolated in this way? Some have mentioned that this almost is reminiscent of what happened after the fighting in Syria came to somewhat of a halt after 2016, and the United States focused primarily on starving Syria for everything it had. Your thoughts on whether the United States can be successful, or do you believe the U.S. could be successful in starving Iran in the same manner?
Well, let's say that use the Syria analogy. So you're saying that the starvation began in 2016 and it led to the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in 2024 December. So, I'm not much of a mathematician, but that would imply somewhere around 8 years. There's 2 years left in the Trump administration. Whoever takes over after Trump is going to be finding a world completely different, and the person will hopefully have a little bit more functioning brain power than to try and continued failed policies. So, Trump isn't going to strangle Iran to death in 2 years. That's not going to happen. How are they planning on doing this? I mean, one of the things is that they're going to sanction the hell out of anybody who dares buy anything from Iran, like oil. You know how long that sanction the hell out of them policy is going to work when China buys Iranian oil? It's not going to work at all. India, it's not going to work. Don't forget that I think it's next month that Xi Jinping's showing up in New York. Trump will be there for the General Assembly debate, but Xi Jinping isn't going to be speaking at the United Nations. He's just coming in for a meeting, a state visit. He's going to actually go to the White House and have a state visit with Trump. Trump wants this more than anything in the world. Do you really think that state visit is going to be the success that Trump wants if Trump is sanctioning the hell out of Chinese companies buying Iranian oil? Trump doesn't even know what he's doing right now. He hasn't even thought this one through. And so, no, I don't think it's possible that the United States will be able to economically strangle Iran. First of all, Iran has some big supporters in Russia and in China, who both have a vested interest in, having Iran, survive and thrive. But right now, survival modes means that there needs to be trade with Iran, and there needs to be economic activity. Russia will continue to supply Iran with what Russia's supplying. China will do the same thing. And I don't think Russia or China care about American sanctions, primary or secondary at this point. And if the United States gets too crazy with China, China holds all the cards, literally. So I just think what happened is the president got a briefing from the Pentagon that said, Mr. President, there are no military options available to us regarding the Strait of Hormuz. And so he just panicked and he tweeted out this tweet, or he had somebody write it up for him and they sent it out. It's not coordinated policy. They haven't thought this thing through. Like I said, please square the one for me. You can help me here if you have any ideas how this works. But so Scott Bessent, told the president that I can strangle the crap out of Iran. And we need secondary sanctions. Anybody who buys any Iranian oil, we're going to pound. And the president's already said, I will sanction you to 1,000% or whatever percentage throws out there. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio's knocking on the door to China saying, hey, we got this state visit thing coming up. We know you're going to come out. It's going to be really cool. It's nice. We'll put out red carpet, big deal, bands, soldiers marching, and we love you. We're trying to keep the door open. Things are going to be nice. Part of the charm offensive that Trump seems to be going on. And those two policies don't work. They don't blend. What happens when Iran sells oil to China? Which they're doing now and they will continue to do. Does Trump sanction Chinese oil companies? Sanctions the Chinese refineries? China's already gone on record telling them earlier, pound sand. Remember that? The secondary sanctions against Chinese buyers of Iranian oil. And the Chinese government went, keep buying it, guys. we're going to back you up 100%. And they did. I don't think China's policies changed any. So this tweet that he put out, it wasn't coordinated with anybody. It's just made up stuff, and it won't survive. And all we know about Donald Trump is let's just wait 24, 36 hours. He'll put out another tweet that changes this. So there we are.
Yeah, well, here's that tweet again, Scott. The key part here, because it's always a lot of text when it comes to Donald Trump's Truth Socials, but today I'm also announcing that any country that allows its financial institutions, businesses, airports, or government entities to provide any type of lifeline to Iran will itself face tremendous economic consequences. Oil smuggling, swap lines, cash transfers, exchange houses, ship registries, front companies, it all needs to stop now. You know who you are. Which makes me think, Scott, throughout his whole administration, he's been very hesitant to actually go after Russia and China, two of Iran's biggest partners, directly, in large part because, well, going after China has actually had economic consequences in the United States with the tariffs and all of this. And then, of course, Russia, there seems to be a block for Trump in terms of any kind of effective policy to do anything different than what's already happening now against Russia. So is this all just bluster then, especially with Russia? Because it really is Russia and China here. There aren't many other countries lining up at the door to, to stand up to U.S. economic warfare in this regard.
Well, I mean, first of all, Turkey. Turkey has a lot of front companies that are in with the Iranians. Georgia has some. I'm sure, the Pakistanis got a bunch. Turkmenistan. The Iranians have been doing this stuff for a long time. They're very good at. They're very good at evading sanctions. I don't know, what Trump is talking about. Again, the Department of Treasury has come in and given him a briefing, probably backed up by the CIA. I'm familiar with these because we used to see these same briefings when it came to trying to stop the Iraqis from breaking sanctions. We look for front companies everywhere in Europe using Palestinian proxies, the whole thing. So I know these briefings inside and out, and I know what the Department of Treasury has put together. I know what the CIA's put together. And I also know that past experience shows that a lot of it's just wrong. It's just bad analysis. Somebody didn't connect the right dots. It's incomplete, meaning that there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening that they're not aware of, that's not reported. And at the end of the day, it's almost impossible to stop. Because the way these front companies operate, you'd have to go in and shut down, all of Jordan's banking industry. You'd have to go in, get the Swiss to stop playing games. You'd have to, go into, Slovakia and the Czech Republic because some of the banking stuff. The people that do this for a living, smugglers and the people that go around sanctions, they're very clever. They've been doing this for an awful long time. And they have, shell companies, fake companies, false leads. They've been avoiding detection for decades. So, Trump received a briefing and thinks that he's empowered with information sufficient to have an impact on the situation. I don't believe he is. I don't think the United States has ever been empowered to that degree where they can speak about, an economic D-Day. But this is just the stupidity of the people surrounding Donald Trump who have allowed this kind of language to, infiltrate his social media postings.
Well, Scott, the stupidity does extend even further as you see the people surrounding him. So as Brent crude accelerates, I know you write for Energy Intelligence too, so I definitely want your comment on this. It breaks $94 today, which is the highest level since last month. Scott Bessent had these comments to say, a bit perplexed about why this is happening at all. Here is what he said.
Yeah, well, look, anything that happens within a 24-hour period is noise. And, I think that once the market understands that we are focusing on fiscal consolidation and that we are trying to bring the market back into equilibrium, in a thinly traded market, I think I'm confident that bonds will continue declining. We've got a spike in oil prices today that I don't really understand. Our announcement is for economic action, and I think that the economic action will mean that oil prices will come down sooner.
So, Scott, he doesn't really understand why it's going down, but yet he is the Secretary of the Treasury. Your thoughts on this? Or coming up, I should say.
I just think he's the wrong man for the job. I think he's a man who exists to please Donald Trump. I don't think he has any grand, innovative global economic strategies. I think he lives every day, putting out one fire after another fire after another fire. Right now his job is to bring stability to a bond market that's been destroyed because, the bond market requires global stability and, especially U.S. bonds. And there's none of that from the United States. There's no confidence in the United States. There's no underlying plan that generates the kind of confidence that would make, purchasing U.S. Treasuries, worthwhile at this time. So he's putting out fires. A large aspect of, putting out a bond-related fire is confidence. Do people have confidence? And so he has to project an air of confidence. But, he's in pure panic mode. So is the United States government. We're in trouble. The American people should wake up to the fact that Donald Trump is literally destroying the economy of the United States, and with it, threatening to destroy the economies of much of the world, who are heavily invested in U.S. Treasury. So, look, if you want to dig deeper into Scott Bessent, go talk to Michael Hudson or talk to Richard Wolff or somebody with an economic background. I can just tell you that Bessent is just as useless as day is long when it comes to the kind of rational policy advice that should be being provided to the President of the United States. Nothing Bessent has done has worked. Nothing.
Well, how about we get to the Ukraine conflict, Scott? Because last night there was a massive attack on Kiev and surrounding areas, hitting defense tech sites all across the capital. Ukraine said they downed about 90% of everything, but were complaining that the Iskanders, of Zircons, these hypersonic missiles, were hitting and landing on their targets, with Patriot missile interceptors essentially gone. Now, a lot of people are saying that the situation is a lot worse than this, and I want your assessment on what's going on, because Ukraine and the Western mainstream media are still celebrating these drone attacks, but even inside of these reports, you'll see that Russia has taken down 90, 95, 98% of the massive number of these drones fired at Russia. So how do you explain in real terms then, Scott, what's going on beyond the media spin?
Last couple of days, Ukraine fired over 1,400 drones, long-range drones into Russia. 1,400. These drones have anywhere from 10 to 20 kilograms of high explosive warhead. They go pop. The vast majority of these, as you said, 98% plus have been shot down. A handful have made it through to their targets where they go pop. Sometimes they go pop on a wild berries warehouse, and they cause tremendous fires inside, burning up cardboard boxes and things of that nature. A lot of flame, a lot of smoke. Sometimes they go pop on a refinery, and they cause some damage that requires the refinery to be shut down, and then repaired, and a week and a half, 2 weeks later, brought back online. Ukrainian drone attacks are inconvenient. In some places, they're more inconvenient than others. In some places, they don't matter at all. But it's a propaganda exercise. We know it is. It's designed to create the impression that Vladimir Putin can't defend Russia. Remember September 20th, the State Duma elections. The CIA and MI6 are basically trying to repeat, past attempts to undermine Russia domestically, politically. They did this in 2007, 2008. They tried again in 2011, 2012, and now they're making another run at it now. It's a form of regime change to indirectly attack the stability of Vladimir Putin by undercutting him at the State Duma to try and get the party or parties that support him removed or diminished in terms of their power. They do this by creating the impression of weakness or insufficiency on the part of Vladimir Putin. Previously, in 2007, it was about corruption. In 2011, 12, it was about the economy. And now it's about the war. He can't defend you. I mean, you have people like Gilbert Doctorow suggesting that Putin's a coward. So, this seems to be the thematic going on. Let's just acknowledge that the Ukrainian drone war has failed, hasn't achieved what it wanted to achieve. Now, what has Russia done in response? Well, last night was an example of it. They held off for a couple of days, accumulating sufficient stockpiles of missiles, and then they fired them against targets that were relevant, and they destroyed them. You're not going to see too much of this talked about in the mainstream media or whatever, but to show you just how good the Russians are at targeting and why it's relevant. I think in the Bovary section of Kiev is a large petroleum storage facility that was struck extensively by the Russians. Some of the facilities that were struck carried petroleum products that were for civilian use, commercial use. It just means there's going to be an even greater gas shortage in Ukraine right now, greater than what's already been achieved with Russia attacking about 400 gas stations. But they struck one that was exclusively for the Ukrainian military. This was the fuel that they had been hoarding up for a Ukrainian counterattack that was timed to begin short of the September 20th election. The purpose of this counterattack was to threaten Russian forces in the vicinity of Sumy and Kharkov, perhaps even to penetrate into Russian territory, similar to what they did in August of 2024, and to embarrass Vladimir Putin, to say, look, this man simply can't protect you. Look at what our military is doing. Well, that fuel no longer exists, which means all the vehicles that Ukraine was hoping could be driven towards the Russian border won't be driven anywhere. And the counterattack is pretty much over before it begins. This shows that the Russians are striking decisively. They know what targets to hit. The targets they're hitting have a real impact on the situation. And this is the reality. Ukraine fires thousands, very few hit, and what they hit is insignificant. Russia fires dozens. They hit everything they aim at, and it's all destroyed. This is just a simple military math. The Russians are going to grind them down on this front as well.
Yeah, it seems like you're explaining, Scott, is Ukraine, the NATO, they've all tried to say that it's Russia that is feeling now the economic pain, the burden of the war coming home. But it sounds like actually Russia's approach now to this war, which has been escalating, actually, it is escalatory if anyone keeps track of the numbers of strikes that are hitting targets in recent weeks and months, that it's actually achieving. I mean, there is also, I believe, a Russian blockade, on Ukraine as well, that the Western mainstream media doesn't want to talk about. Maybe you could talk about this.
Well, I mean, one of the things from the 40-day war that Zelensky announced on June 25th was an expansion of the drone conflict to include striking targets in the Sea of Azov. There are many Russian ships in there. Over a dozen were attacked and hit. And also to expand the conflict into the Caspian Sea to threaten Russian shipping routes between Russia and Iran, Russia and Turkmenistan, etc. And I think this was, an expansion that was ill thought out. So what Russia's done in return is to basically kick Ukraine out of the Black Sea. They're attacking all shipping. They're shutting down the ports of Odessa and other ports. They're denying Ukraine the ability to export grain. They're denying Ukraine the ability to import weapons and other critical, items for their economy. 60% of the Iranian economy is in danger of being shut down because of this. This is destroying Iran. Businesses are going out of business. What little resources that that Ukraine had stockpiled are being burned up, and warehouses are being struck by Russia on a daily basis. You're looking at the economic strangulation of Ukraine today, and what you're doing is you're setting you're establishing the conditions of what conflict termination will look like. I think Russia's made a decision that Ukraine, especially in its current configuration, cannot be permitted access to the Black Sea. Right now, they're denying it indirectly. I think one of Russia's long-term goals in this conflict is to deny it directly, meaning that Odessa will be occupied by the Russians and eventually be incorporated into Russia.
You recently wrote an article, Scott, Ukraine, Welcome to the New Reality. Do you want to talk about what you were writing about there? Because I know that it even discusses a much broader scope, a scope that some have been denying of late, even after the Iran situation has really opened up questions and debates about the ongoing reality and viability of a U.S./NATO hegemonic order.
I mean, basically, what I did is I compared and contrasted where Russia was, diplomatically speaking, as recently as June of this year, where Vladimir Putin came out and said, well, in June he said that, this war is going to be fought. There's unconditional. We have strict, requirements, etc. But then in August, he meets with Donald Trump after the Americans put forward a peace plan built around the concept of compromise. And Vladimir Putin basically said, okay, I'll do the compromise. And the compromise appears to be basically freezing the line of contact and doing a land swap, meaning that where Russia occupies lands that are considered, Ukrainian, then Russia will keep those. And where Ukraine occupies land that Russia considers to be Russian, Ukraine gets to keep that, and they'll just draw the line there. They'll have the basis of a ceasefire. Moving on. Apparently in Anchorage, the Russians believe that the United States, having made the request for compromise and having embraced this, agreed to it, and yet nothing happened. Instead, what you see is a continued expansion of the war to include this 40-day drone war. And what you see now is that Russia has taken a very hard line on this now. They've gone back to basically unconditional surrender is how this war ends. But it's even worse than that. It means that the United States has lost its ability to function as a mediator. We're not trusted anymore. Russia's not believes that Alaska wasn't just a failure, but it was deliberately sabotaged by the United States that used Alaska as a mechanism of buying time for the Ukrainians to build up military resources. So the new reality is that this war ends on Russia's terms and Russia's terms alone, and this will be very bad for Ukraine. It means that Ukraine will be significantly reduced in terms of its the territory, in terms of its economic potential. When Russia says, denazification, it means the end of the Zelensky regime, already affiliated with the Zelensky regime. When he says demilitarization, it means that every weapon that the United States and NATO has provided to Ukraine will either be destroyed, turned over to Russia, or returned home. But there will be no Western, weaponry. It means the physical destruction of Ukraine and the eradication of the Ukrainian government.
Yeah. And, Scott, I'm wondering your opinion. There's been a lot of interesting developments, strange ones. The U.S. was supposed to be conducting pretty extensive military drills out in South Korea with South Korea in the Pacific. Those were scaled back because Trump said that South Korea didn't sufficiently help the United States with the Iran war. Now, the USS George Washington has just replaced the USS Lincoln, and Trump is boasting about how this blockade will be just that much more effective now than it has been in the past. And of course, you have now a Ukraine conflict that is very much stagnant when it comes to U.S. objectives, but really advancing when it comes to Russian objectives. So how does this play out? Midterms coming up, and also the potential for economic catastrophe the longer that guys like Scott Besson act or play or are actually stupid and continue on this path.
Well, what we're watching is the unrolling of a national security architecture, global, that has been decades in the making. I mean, let's just look at what you started out with, the military exercises in South Korea. This happened because Donald Trump in the middle of the night put out a social media posting that said that, I've ordered the Secretary of War, Defense, to significantly reduce our involvement in these annual military exercises. These are the major military exercises that, allow the United States and South Korean militaries to, function in a cohesive fashion in case of war. These exercises, in addition to being annual in terms of, the scheduling, the planning for it begins months in advance. These are not simple exercises; they're complicated exercises. But these exercises are done to prepare a military establishment that now sits as the core feature of what we'll call the tripartite pact between the United States, South Korea, and Japan. If you remember, Joe Biden back in June of 2023, maybe, had the camp, held meetings at Camp David where he brought all these leaders together and they formalized this pact. It says the United States will be there for you. We're your security blanket. Don't worry. We got THAAD interceptors in South Korea. You got Patriot 3s in Japan. We're giving Japan 400 cruise missiles. You guys are part of our joint nuclear war planning now. You're part of you got big boy pants. You get to come to the big boy tent. And even as recently as last year in September, I believe, Trump reiterated the importance of this tripartite agreement. What's happened since then? Well, we ran out of ammunition in the Middle East, so we took away the THAAD battery in South Korea without asking. We took away the 3 PAC-3 batteries in Japan without asking. We denied Japan the ability to buy 400 cruise missiles with little coordination, and then we get upset when the president turns to South Korea and says, "Hey, could you come and help us open up the Strait of Hormuz?" And the South Korean president said, "No." Now, what could Korea bring? Nothing. They don't have a blue water navy. I mean, so how does Korea even factor into this thing? But Trump took umbrage of it, so he said significantly reduce the exercises. These exercises have been, months in the planning. They were supposed to happen, I think he put the tweet out Sunday night. The exercise is supposed to happen Monday morning. And that means that everybody who was planning everything suddenly was told, you're not doing this. I mean, it's just chaos. It's devastating. It reduces confidence in the United States, but it is reflective of the reality that America is, under Donald Trump, is looking for a way to reduce our exposure in the Pacific. He said, why should I maintain 39,000 troops in South Korea if this is, they don't want to help us? Why should we help them? And I think he's talking about reducing the troops. With Iran, again, we got beat and we're leaving. All those military bases we had in the Gulf Arab countries are practically abandoned now. The United States is moving military resources out. We're in Saudi Arabia, we've moved into Jordan, we've moved into Europe, et cetera. And I think that's the direction we're heading. We're leaving. Why? Because, we were insufficient to the task. And we no longer have the trust and confidence of the Gulf Arab nations who previously, labored under the belief that they had an American security blanket that was going to keep them safe at night. Well, there is no American security blanket. We roll into Europe and Ukraine. The United States has, in effect, abandoned Ukraine. They talk about, opening up intelligence sharing, but when you dig deep enough, it just means that they're giving some basic access to commercial satellites, but we're not giving them really anything really good anymore. But Trump has done the same thing. He had a meeting, press conference where he was talking about NATO and U.S. forces. And he said they weren't there when we needed help. Maybe I'm not going to be there for them. And then he said, I think I made some breaking news here. Did anybody catch what I said? Yeah, he said he's withdrawing from NATO. I think that's dirty. We're looking at the United States in retrograde. It doesn't matter what our good friend Richard Medhurst might put out on his social media platform to the contrary. The reality is that the United States is in retreat in the Pacific, in the Middle East, and in Europe. And I think people need to, reflect on this reality that we aren't the nation that we used to be, and we're definitely not the nation that Donald Trump thinks we are.
Yeah, it almost seems like the more that Donald Trump and his administration boasts about, this massive defeat in Iran and everything is going so well in all of these fronts, and that the United States is stronger than ever before. Seems like it's almost one of those cases that the more you say that, the less true it actually is.
It's an episode of Seinfeld, Opposite Day. I mean, literally, it's a Seinfeld episode. We're doing so good. That really means we're doing quite bad. Everything he says, it's the exact opposite.
And so, as we hit the last 10 minutes or so here, Scott, what does this mean then, especially for the countries in question here, Russia, Iran, China? Where do they go from here? There's still 2 more years of Trump. Iran, the Iran war situation seems like it's going to be for a while in this, as Iran calls it, no peace, no war kind of scenario, given the options of the United States and the way that Iran wants to approach its own objectives. And then, of course, with Ukraine, Russia has seemed to make a concerted decision. It will escalate, but it's going to do it on its terms. And China, of course, is China. So your thoughts on where things are heading now, as it seems like the U.S. is getting more desperate at on the war fronts in terms of the warmongers, but the options are very limited.
Yeah, that we have to examine all the issues that you just raised. We collectively, all of us, I mean, your audience, you, me, we have to be careful not to be victims of our past conditioning. And what I mean by that is, regardless of how you felt about the United States or how you feel about the United States, you could be anti-American, pro-American, neutral on America. I think everybody had to acknowledge that America was a power to be reckoned with, that the United States, had, very strong establishments of governance. We had a deep state that helped perpetuate, bad policy. It would be my opinion, but some people say policy in general. But you didn't have to, like us. And maybe you feared us, but you should also respect us. Not respect in terms of, wow, I aspire to be you, but to respect saying, yeah, America, they're doing a lot of harm, but they really got their act together when it comes to doing harm, and there's not much we can do to stop them. The American system. Today we don't have that. We have a cult of personality. Literally one man who makes the entire world revolve around him and him alone. This is a completely different world from an assessment standpoint. Where do you begin? How, what's the framework? The 4 corners of our assessment are defined by what? It used to be defined by, American, establishment, the American system. Today it's defined by the cult of personality and the senior cultist, the object of their desire. If you're not evaluating American policy from the standpoint that it's a policy that singularly serves a hegemon, a policy that singularly serves, a narcissist, that this is all about the cult of personality, all about sustaining the Trump brand. if you're not approaching problem solving from that perspective, you're not solving the right problem. There's that old saying that you can't solve a problem you haven't adequately or correctly defined. Because what are you solving? If you haven't defined it properly, it means whatever solution you're trying to do isn't going to define the problem. And we need to acknowledge that the problem today is the malignant narcissism of Donald Trump. The fact that we don't have a president where the office of the presidency is held in high regard. We have a cult of personality where the only thing that matters is the senior cultist.
Yeah, and that dynamic, Scott, seems to further empower neocons, warmongers, military-industrial complex, Wall Street. They seem to be making off very well with this cult, this cult of personality, this narcissistic framing of everything, where Trump, gets all the attention he wants, and the policies end up being what they have been, which are a disaster when it comes to at least those who sit outside of the insider trading markets, etc.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, there are some things that the United States may not have full control over, and I want your final comment on this because some have been asking me about it, is what the heck is going on with Turkey, Israel, and this whole situation with Syria? Because some have voiced concern that there might be an open conflict between Turkey and Israel. Do you think that's possible? What would be the U.S.'s role in that, if any at all? Or if there's any ability for the U.S. to have a role in that at this point?
Well, I think one of the problems of our time that hasn't been adequately, resolved is what the hell happened in Syria. Bashar al-Assad seemed to be firmly in control in a situation that was relatively stable, with the backing of Russia and Iran. The United States seemed to have, be a policy adrift with no, the day of, sycamore timber, or whatever the hell that CIA program was to arm the rebels seemed to be done. Turkey seemed to be mollified and put on the sideline in terms of its support for the Idlib rebels, that Russia seemed to be in the driver's seat there. And just literally in the span of, 2 or 3 weeks, it just all flipped. And I think it took everybody by surprise, including the Turkish government, including the Israeli government, including the United States, the Russian government, including Bashar al-Assad, who one day woke up in Damascus going, I better get on an airplane or they're going to kill me, kind of thing. And we're struggling to figure out just what the hell it is. How else do you explain a former Al-Qaeda head chopper being wined and dined and greeted by everybody? Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, everybody, Macron, they're all shake because there is no plan B. This thing came out of nowhere. And you have Jolani now there, and everybody's going, what the hell happened? And I think we're still in that shock mode, responding to that. And because it took everybody by surprise, there weren't any concerted policies in place on how to proceed. Israel lives to exploit chaos and anarchy. And so what Israel did is just fill that vacuum. And it came in an auspicious time for Israel because they were sort of getting their asses handed to them everywhere, but then they punched into Syria. It seemed to change the entire perspective. Now things have calmed down a little bit. Turkey, was the key sponsor of Jolani and his Idlib head choppers. And, Turkey is seeking now to begin, consolidating their control over Syria. And so they were looking at occupying a military base, putting in Turkish assets. And Israel, who has been saying now for some time now, especially with the fall of Syria, that Turkey is the number one threat. I mean, there are senior members of the Israeli government who have stopped saying that Iran is the number one threat, and they're now saying that Turkey is the number one threat. And Turkey perhaps is the number one threat because while Iran can fire missiles into Israel, Turkey can put divisions on the Turkish border, and you don't want to fight the Turks. And I don't like being dismissive of people, but let me just be very dismissive of the IDF. If the IDF went up against a real military, they would be slaughtered. The IDF doesn't know how to die. I mean, you don't want to die, but You talk to the best combat soldiers are the ones who say right up the front that I gave up hope of surviving, and I just acknowledged that I was going to die, and then therefore I was going to make my death as painful to the enemy as possible. So I'm singularly focused on killing the enemy, executing my mission, but I don't go to bed at night looking at the photograph of my wife and my kids and having hope that I'm going to survive. No, hope is gone. I'm going to die. The Turks do this very well. The history of the Turkish brigade in Korea, people should familiarize themselves. The commanding general of the brigade was a Gallipoli veteran. That means that in 1915, he was fighting the Anzacs in Gallipoli, where literally Ataturk, when his division came in, he said, "I'm not ordering you to advance. I'm ordering you to die," meaning get up that hill and stop them. And none of you are coming back. You're all going to die doing this. And the Turks went, "Yes, sir." And up the hill they went. They showed up in Korea, and nobody talked to them. They didn't speak English, and nobody English speakers spoke Turkish. And the brigade just sort of advanced while everybody's retreating. The Chinese had just attacked, and the Turks ran out of ammunition because they outstripped their logistics, because there was no logistics plan because nobody tried. So they just fixed bayonets and they kept attacking. Then they turned around and attacked, and they came back, and a lot of them were dead, but they never surrendered. That's the Turks. And if you want to know the character of the Turkish soldier, the sergeant major was on duty on the night of July 16th of 2016 when the coup took place. He got a phone call from the commanding general of Special Forces, and who said, "You know who I am?" He said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, my deputy is betraying the president. He's going to land a helicopter at the compound with 40 guys. They're going to come in and try and take over. And you can't let that happen. Kill him on sight." And the guy said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "You know what I'm saying?" "Yes, sir." "You understand what it means?" "Yes, sir." They hung up the phone. Guy checked his pistol, walked out, helicopter landed. The general and 40 guys showed up. He pulled out the pistol and killed the general on sight. And then he was killed. But that was his duty. These are the guys that the Israelis don't want to fight. Okay, the Israelis don't know how to die. They don't want to die. They scream and they have snot coming out of their nose when they all cry and wail as they're burying people. Hey, war's hell. Israel likes to rape little kids. Israel likes to murder people. Israel likes to, shoot pregnant babies. Israel likes to commit genocide. But Israel doesn't like to fight. They don't know how to fight. They literally don't know how to fight. And if they go up against an enemy that can fight, they will be wiped off the face of the earth. And Israel knows that if they take on the Turks head on, they're in for a lot of trouble. So they're trying to preempt it by, hitting a Syrian base before the Turks got there. I don't think it's going to work. Does Israel have a right to fear the Turks? Yes. Should Israel fear the Turks? I hope so. I'd like to see Erdogan actually put some action behind his words condemning Israel's genocidal behavior in Gaza. It would be nice. What would the United States do? Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. What can we do?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to be careful. Trump knows this. Why do you think Trump went to Ankara? He didn't want to go to this NATO meeting. He doesn't like them. I already told you. He said he's going to withdraw from there. He had that little briefing where he said, I'm going to make headlines now. I'm pulling American troops out of Europe. And everybody went, what? Yeah. But he went to Ankara because of Erdogan. He respects Erdogan. And he went there and he met with Erdogan. He continued to speak highly of Erdogan. But the Turks, they don't need too much excuse to just say, the hell with you, Europe. We're done. I mean, they know they're not going to be part of the European Union. They've been trying to be. Europe won't let them in. They know they're basically NATO, which is a failed institution, is trying to sustain itself on the backs of Turkey. And I don't think the Turks are going to take that bait. Turkey is trying to fill the gap, the vacuum that's been created by America's defeat against Iran. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan have come together with some sort of tripartite defense pact. But that means that Turkey's, oriented away from Europe towards West Asia, towards Central Asia. And so the idea that Trump went there and promised them F-35s and came back and broke that promise. So what is the United States going to do? Threaten Turkey with what? I don't see Turkey rushing war with Israel, but I don't see Turkey standing back and saying, no, I think Turkey's going to take this base. They're going to fortify this base, and then they're going to move south. I think, the United States will work to keep Turkish divisions off of the Syrian-Israeli border. But I think Turkey is going to consolidate its position strategically in Syria. It's very important to do so. It solves many problems, including the Kurdish problem, or it helps move towards a resolution that's beneficial to Turkey and detrimental to the cause of Kurdish independence. So and the United States has already abandoned the Kurds. So anybody's like, well, America would never let that happen. We already abandoned them. We're gone. We're done. We're finished. Anyways, that's that. It's a developing situation.
Yeah, it definitely is. Seems like a clash of Turkey's, Erdogan's neo-Ottoman vision and the Greater Israel Project, which at this time the Greater Israel Project is in far greater crisis than than the former. Scott, it was a great show today. I want to make sure I pulled it up earlier in reference to one of your articles. But scottritter.com, your Substack is in the video description for people to support your work. I also want to let you know that tomorrow, August 21st, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, mutual friend Andre Martinov will be on the program. Scott, any final words for the audience before we head out of here?
No, I mean, thanks.